So over the last weekend, Peter Whittle of the New Culture Forum addressed a conference of the New Culture Forum, and he made some points here specifically about the incompetence of our government and about the terrible situation our education establishments are in. The whole thing is, nearly 20 minutes long, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'm just going to pick on a couple of points, and I'll leave a link in the description to the whole lecture address. And it's very interesting, very bleak, I'm sorry to say. Okay, I'm Granniopteryx.
I don't get to have a nice introduction from anyone. So just to say, I'm Peter Whittle, and I'm founder and director of the New Culture Forum. The decline and decay is all around us. Millions of us have been reduced to observers, watching as the ground beneath our feet visibly gives way. There is an increasing and widespread realization that our political and cultural elites work continuously against our interests.
And there he nails down something that I think we're all feeling now, that somehow we're being pushed in a direction we never wanted to go. And somehow the government seems to be disconnected from us and our daily lives. And it is incomprehensible. There's a feeling of how is this happening? And yeah, I feel that too. I'm sure most of you watching this feel that. All right.
There is no longer even the pretense that the views and beliefs of the majority of us are valued.
What really interests me is how someone like David Cameron, who deliberately tried to scupper the Brexit vote in one way or another, and actually named his campaign to stop a Brexit vote Campaign Fear, so you can see where his mind was, is now our foreign minister, appointed by Rishi Sunak. It's like the Terminator, you know? You blast that sort of, that Mercury-like figure, and you blast it, and then it turns out there's little spots all over the floor, and you think, globs of it, and you think you've finished it off, and then they all start coalescing and reform. That's exactly the feeling I'm getting.
Indeed, they are actively ignored or demonised. Free speech in Britain is now just a term.
And I have at this point to point out that since my channel has got a little bit bigger and has gone into a slightly more international league than it was just a couple of months ago, suddenly I find myself in the best of company, having the comments on my videos disabled at source. So you can see the idea. When I was a little channel, they didn't bother much about me, but now it's getting bigger. My voice is being stilled, and not my voice, but your voice. And that's really important, because those comments, I really, as you know, I read all of them because they interest me. There are some very funny and witty comments, and there are some very pertinent comments, and there are some making points I hadn't thought of, which I do appreciate. If comments are stopped on any of my videos, I suggested you do that on Twitter, but no, just go back to a previous video and put it there, because when I look for comments, I don't look for specific video comments. I just ask for general comments. Just let me know which video you're talking about.
No wonder that everyday saying that you always used to hear, "It's a free country," has virtually disappeared.
Well, it's free for some, isn't it?
We have a governing class that is riven with incompetence, cowardice, and a complete inability to acknowledge the enormity of the problems which face us.
Yeah, that's right. Incompetence for sure. And jockeying for position, which never does anyone any. It's not a team thing anymore. It's a clique thing. And yeah, we are in trouble. We're in financial trouble. In America, you have, what is it? Something ridiculous like £17 trillion dollar deficit, or maybe it was 70 trillion. I don't remember. But there's this huge deficit. We're all running on these deficits in Britain too. And they're not acknowledging that. They're not saying, no, look, we can't afford this. I'm sorry, you know, because they're afraid of the media, and the media will say anything that whips up opposition to what they're opposed to.
Now, the mainstream media increasingly acts, I think you'd agree, as merely the carrier of the acceptable political message.
Right, so that just sets the scene. There was one thing he said that really hit me, and unfortunately, I don't think it's going to, I don't see how it's going to be repaired. Now, I'm going to look for it, so I may have to cut here if I don't get it straight away.
Now, in our most recent publication, we set out 10 clear and simple actions which we believe are needed to save Britain. And they amount to our manifesto. I will go through them. They should come up here too. 1, there must be a permanent and complete end to mass immigration. And this must start with a total freeze on all further migration for a certain period. The United Kingdom must withdraw from the European Convention of Human Rights. The Equality Act must be abolished. The thorough, balanced history of Britain and its achievements, as outlined by Rafe earlier, must be taught to every pupil in every school to the age of 16.
Right. Now, that is where I agree. The problem is, who are you going to get to teach it? Because the schools are full of teachers who don't believe in the history of Britain. They are the people driving this generation, and unfortunately it's up to our universities as well. So you may say, right, you have to teach British history from a standpoint of we're living here in Britain and we are proud of what Britain did. You may say that, but how are you going to enforce it? Are you going to, you know, stand an armed policeman in every classroom where the teacher can undermine everything in the curriculum with a couple of comments? This is a serious problem. It's all very well for him to say, yeah, we've got to do this. It's another thing entirely to get those teachers to do it. And you can't keep an eye on all of them. And then you get the universities, same thing. What are you going to do? March into the history departments and arrest people? You can't do that. And so this is why I say I agree with him. I would be very interested, if comments are allowed, in some suggestions about how this may be achieved. Because it's far more easily said than done when you have what's going on in the schools. and in the universities. All right, let's see what's next. That was the main point of what I wanted to talk about. I'll just listen to a little bit more.
It must be stated unequivocally that there is no blasphemy law in this country, and that any attempt to establish a de facto one will be actively prevented by the government.
And again, you see, they know, for instance, there are people in certain parts of the country, pockets of Muslim fanaticism, where occasionally the residents come out and hold up placards saying, behead those who insult Muhammad or the Prophet or whatever they choose to call him. And they're not arrested. Now, that isn't a blasphemy law. That's simple incitement to murder. And yet the police aren't doing that because these guys, our prisons would be full of them. And they're already full enough of Islamists who force other prisoners to accept their religion. Now, the prisons are great recruiting grounds for Islam. You might not be aware of that, but they are. So that's another problem. What are you going to do? Establish camps for these guys? Well, yeah, you can deport them if they're not British citizens, but many of them are. That is, again, another problem. He's talking from a civilized point of view. Here's the law, we should apply it. The problem is there are people who don't recognise the law as we understand it, living in this country.
The concepts in law of hate and harmful speech must be scrapped. There must be a complete ban on the teaching, as though it were fact, of critical race theory, gender ideology, and all associated ideologies in schools across the country. There must be a ban on compulsory attendance at so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion courses and unconscious bias sessions. I don't know how many of you have experienced those yet, but all public funding of them should end. All institutions and quangos, including publicly funded broadcasters, which stray from their core purpose by prioritising ideology instead, must be challenged and, if possible, lose their funding.
Yeah, that's all very well, but who decides on this, that they're straying or not? That's a very loose thing. It's again, great thought, not sure how it could be put into practice and who is going to make the decisions. You've got another quango, haven't you? I seem to remember one government getting into power on the promise that they were going to make a bonfire of the quangos. Well, that bonfire seemed to have just increased the number, because I think they doubled by the end of that government's tenure. I'm not so sure of the figures there. Vague memory.
Finally, those bodies which, instead of promoting Britain and caring for its history and heritage, actually undermine it, and it happens on a daily basis now, should be replaced either with another which does do the job, or all public funding should be withdrawn.
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't be made to pay for our own suicide. One thing he hasn't spoken about is the Supreme Court, which is an American idea that Blair was obsessed with, and we don't need it. We have the House of Lords. That is our Supreme Court. And that definitely should be abolished. It's a total waste of money.
I think those were all very moderate.
Right, because what he was saying in his most of his speech was that the people who are called right-wing fanatics, like him and me, obviously, are actually the moderates. The fanatics are the ones who insist that that women can have the sexual equipment of a man and all the rest of it. Okay, well, that's Peter Whittle. I just thought you'd be interested. I'll leave the link to the whole thing in the description. But yeah, this is a problem. He's voicing some sensible ideas, but how they're put into practice, well, I really would like to discuss that if I'm allowed to do that. So if you can put comments underneath, please do. If you can't, put them under another video. Just make sure I know which video you're talking about. All right, till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the granniopteryx design or Granbo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.granniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.